The program will now begin.
Hello and welcome to this virtual program on the dire humanitarian and human rights crisis in Burma. I'm Milan Verveer and I direct the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. And we're very pleased to be able to host today's important discussion with the permanent missions to the United Nations of the Czech Republic, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. We gather today on the sidelines of the 2022 UN Security Council open debate on women, peace, and security. The situation in Myanmar grows more grave by the day. After the failed military coup in February 2021, Myanmar's security forces have only intensified massive human rights abuses, engaged in systematic attacks on peaceful protests, committing arbitrary detentions, torture, and killings. In short, some of the most egregious violations of human rights that amount to crimes against humanity and war crimes. At the same time, the resistance to the military continues as the Burmese people have continued to resist what is happening to them. And Burmese women and girls are on the front lines of the pro-democracy movement. They are courageously leading peaceful demonstrations, standing up for their rights, and driving the struggle for a democratic and secure future for Burma, often at great risk to themselves. Today, we will hear from a few of these extraordinary women leaders who are working tirelessly to address this crisis. They are calling for international solidarity, for justice and accountability for the Burmese people. Before we turn to our speakers, we will see a short video showing the situation that is occurring on the ground. Please be aware, this video depicts several disturbing scenes of the ongoing atrocities. We are grateful to Karana Productions and the team at Asia Work Bangkok for their efforts to put this together. Now to the video.
Since the Myanmar military seized power in a coup in February 2021, the country has plunged into darkness. Crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide committed by the Myanmar military and security forces, documented by media and citizen journalists across the country, offer evidence of the gravity of this crisis. 1 million Rohingya, driven from their homes by the genocidal campaign in 2017, languished in the world's largest refugee camp in Bangladesh. Karen, Kaya, Chin, Kachin, Mon, Sagaing, and central Myanmar regions are impacted by the war. No one is safe. Since 2021, armed conflict between the Myanmar military, ethnic armed organizations, and the recently formed People's Defense Force has displaced more than 1 million people, mostly in ethnic regions. In September 2022, 11 children in a school were killed by a Myanmar military airstrike and indiscriminate fire. One student, whose body was severed in half, cried out to his mother before he died. This is the reality of terror and violence affecting millions across Myanmar. homes and businesses of activists and their families have been seized, while doctors, teachers, journalists, and poets are hunted down for arrest for taking part in the civil disobedience movement. Over 15,000 have been arrested, with documented cases of torture in detention. More than 2,300 have been killed. And in July of this year, for the first time in decades, the junta executed by hanging 4 political activists. Myanmar is burning, and the military has not been held accountable. Coordinated targeted sanctions to stop the ability of the junta to continue to use arms against its own people and to destroy the country's future are urgently needed. Impunity must end now.
We turn now to Alice Nderitu, who serves as the UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. Special Advisor Nderitu is a recognized voice in the field of peace building and violence prevention, having led efforts as a mediator and senior advisor in numerous reconciliation processes. She's also served as the commissioner of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission in Kenya, as well as the founder of Community Voices for Peace and Pluralism, a network of African women professionals preventing, transforming, and solving violent ethnic, racial, and religious conflicts. Alice will tell us how the international community can prevent continued atrocities and genocide in Burma and ensure accountability, as well as she will tell us what commitments and actions are needed to address this widespread and systematic attacks against the Burmese people.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to address you at this event and apologize that I could not join you in the discussion and in person. The topic of today's meeting is very close to my mandate. As a special advisor on the prevention of genocide, my mandate is to monitor and raise alarm over situations across the world where there's a risk of atrocity crimes, by which I mean genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. I'm also mandated to raise awareness on the causes and dynamics of these crimes and to strengthen the capacity of member states, regional organizations, and civil society to prevent them. So since my mandate is on prevention, I do not have the mandate to make determinations if a particular situation amounts to genocide or other atrocity crimes. This is the task for a competent, independent Court of Justice to determine. So my role then is to raise alarm when I see the risk factors of early warning signs of atrocity crimes, in particular genocide, and to advocate for preventative action to be taken, or for situations where atrocities may be ongoing, to advocate for halting further atrocities and for the importance of accountability for such crimes. So ladies and gentlemen, the situation in Myanmar remains of serious concern. I have expressed my deep concern over violations that have been reported since the military takeover in February 2021. In March last year, the High Commissioner for Human Rights and myself issued a joint statement in which we flagged the serious violations that were being reported and the risk of atrocity crimes. The statement also flagged the risk that the ongoing instability and violence could make minority communities in the country even more vulnerable to violence. This is especially the case for the Rohingya populations, who have faced and continue to face persecution and discrimination. In April this year, I visited the Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar in neighboring Bangladesh to meet with this community and highlight their continued plight. During the visit, I highlighted the importance to keep advocating for the right of the Rohingya to return home to Myanmar, where they can do so voluntarily with full rights, including the citizenship. I also raised my continued concern over the risk that the Rohingya community still face in Myanmar. Over 5 years since the violence in 2017 that led to almost 1 million Rohingya fleeing the country in 2017, and to horrific violations that have been documented by the fact-finding mission that was established by the Human Rights Council, there has been little meaningful action to address the root causes and impact of this violence on the affected communities in Myanmar. My office continues to advocate and support the imperative of accountability for violations and atrocities committed in Myanmar. Only by breaking the circle of impunity can we begin to address the root causes of this violence. I continue to welcome in this regard the ongoing processes at the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, as well as the work of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar established by the Human Rights Council. So their work is crucial to give a sense of justice to the many victims of violence in Myanmar, and would be a first step in breaking the circle of impunity. At the same time, we need to continue to push for restoring democracy, promoting human rights, in particular non-discrimination in Myanmar. In this regard, it is crucial that the Security Council and ASEAN continue to push for the necessary changes. It is also crucial that all actors of influence continue to stress the importance of respect for human rights for the people of Myanmar. This is something I continue to stress as well in my work. Ladies and gentlemen, the specific focus of this event on women, peace and security is very timely. The role of women in genocide and atrocity prevention is a topic that is very close to my heart. Having worked in conflict mediation for several years, I saw firsthand the impact of not involving women in these processes. I always highlight the need to increase the space and role of women in genocide prevention. Women are far too often absent from formal prevention efforts, or treated only as victims, not agents of prevention and accountability efforts. Excluding women from atrocity prevention not only diminishes their contribution and potential role, it also means that well-meaning efforts are not inclusive of large segments of society who are affected by these crimes. So strengthening holistic atrocity prevention will only be possible if women participate equally and meaningfully in decision-making, conflict prevention and resolution, mediation, protection, transitional justice, reconciliation, and peace building, and other processes related to the prevention of atrocity crimes. In July 2022, my office launched an initiative aimed at developing a plan of action for women in preventing atrocity crimes within communities. The draft action plan entails actions that women can take to prevent atrocity crimes within the communities they operate, as well as actions that other stakeholders, including governments, civil society, and international organizations, can implement to support the role of women in this regard. So we do plan to launch the plan of action early next year at the Commission of the Status of Women, CSW, here in New York. This action plan, I believe, will be an important tool to ensure women's voice in prevention and accountability for atrocity crimes is heard. This work is inspired by the work that is already being done by many women, activists, and leaders across the world in this field. You can count on my support and that of my office in these efforts. I thank you.
And we thank Alice for helping us better understand what we must all do to break the circle of impunity, to support human rights in Burma, and to ensure that women are fully participatory in all areas of peace building, conflict prevention, and atrocity prevention. So thank you to Alice, and hopes for her continued important work. We're going to turn now to His Excellency James Kariuki, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations. Earlier, the ambassador served as the Multilateral Policy Director at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, where he was responsible for policy on the UN and multilateral systems, human rights, and sanctions. He's also held several other very important diplomatic posts. Ambassador Kariuki, thank you for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Revere, and thanks to the Georgetown Institute for WPS for hosting this important event in an important week for women, peace and security. As yesterday's council meeting was clear, I think, for anyone who was there, we were really challenged to translate our high ambition on women, peace and security into concrete action on the ground in the places it matters. And so this is an important contribution to that. And I'm also really grateful to Alice Nderitu, my colleague, for her powerful remarks. So as you've both said already, the deteriorating situation in Myanmar is deeply concerning. Violence is increasing, humanitarian needs are growing, and atrocities continue to be committed against the most vulnerable, including women, children, and ethnic minorities. The distressing reports of sexual violence in conflict-affected areas and detention centres build on an existing history of widespread conflict-related sexual violence, as set out in the 2019 UN International Fact-Finding Mission. The ongoing crisis risks further exacerbating the scale and rates of sexual violence. While the challenges around collecting and verifying reporting, including of broader forms of gender-based violence, remain, perpetrators of such atrocities must not be given impunity. To that end, the United Kingdom has been a strong supporter of the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar since its establishment, and we've provided more than $500,000 in additional funding to support evidence gathering capabilities. We also established the Myanmar Witness Programme in 2021 to gather open source information on serious human rights violations and abuses. The United Kingdom encourages the UN to consider alternative pathways for ensuring safe documentation and verification of cases to support future accountability. Women leaders and women-led organizations, many of whom are here in this virtual room with us, are at the front line of the work. And despite the significant risk imposed on them by the military, these women continue to support survivors in documenting human rights abuses and advocating for accountability. The United Kingdom will continue to support local women's rights organizations and international NGOs through flexible funding and capacity building efforts to provide emergency GBV, gender-based violence support. Alongside like-minded partners, including Canada, the US, and the EU, we're working with trafficking survivors and those at risk of modern-day slavery through the Livelihoods and Food Security Fund, LIFT. Now, in the UN, as penholder on both Myanmar and the Women, Peace and Security agenda in the Security Council, the United Kingdom remains committed to ending the crisis through pushing and advocating for respect for human rights and the protection of civilians. And we'll continue to explore all available Council tools to help achieve these ends and to keep the dire situation in Myanmar on the Security Council's and on the international community's agenda. So I thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from our panel coming up now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. We're very grateful for your participation, and certainly most especially for the United Kingdom's continuing commitment on these issues. And you so rightly said that it's not enough to talk about women, peace, and security. It's got to be translated into concrete actions on the ground. And that's certainly one of the key issues in this discussion, is to translate it on the ground in the crisis that is ongoing in Burma. So thank you very much. Before we start our panel discussion, we will hear from Esther Zina, who is a very brave Burmese activist who led the very first anti-military protest in Yangon just 5 days after the attempted coup. She is in hiding, but she has provided us with this video.
Good day to you all. I'm Esther Zinobambo. On the occasion of this Women, Peace and Security Forum dedicated to Myanmar, I would like to highlight Myanmar's present situation. The situation of Myanmar has worsened following the coup. We are facing multidimensional emergencies with compounding humanitarian needs. Mothers delivered babies in the jungle without medical assistance. Many infants do not receive their needed life-saving vaccinations. Little children were killed by targeted airstrikes on schools. And moreover, as a result of weaponizing conflict-related sexual violence as an instrument of war, many girls and women are suffering serious physical, mental, and sexual health outcomes. So with these patterns of crimes by the junta, which is completely against international human rights and humanitarian law, it is likely that a series of catastrophes will follow if we do not get timely international support and interventions. Therefore, I would like to ask 3 points of practical recommendations to response in time of a crisis. Refer the Myanmar situation to the ICC for their mass atrocities and crime against humanity on peaceful protesters and the ethnic people, including Rohingyas. Any humanitarian efforts must be implemented through a comprehensive consultation with civil society organizations to respect the will of the people of Myanmar. Find ways to support young men and women who are fighting at the forefront to restore democracy and build a federal democratic nation. So I would like to end by saying that failure to give attention to Myanmar will lead to the rise of other authoritarian regimes. It will threaten our rule-based world order. So, women fellow builders, despite the threats of horrendous atrocities, will you please call out our messages and call on our respective governments to use your influence to help Myanmar to join you as a democratic state. Thank you.
And we are so grateful to Esther, not just for her bravery and commitment, but also for the message she just left with us in terms of 3 concrete recommendations of actions that must be taken. We're now going to turn to our panel and their firsthand experiences of what is happening in Burma and the recommendations on what all of us should be doing to address the terrible calamity there. We're going to start with Na Susanna Hlaplau So, who is the Minister of Women, Youth, and Children's Affairs at the National Unity Government for the National Unity Government of Myanmar. Earlier, she founded the Karen Women's Action Group, which was aimed at nurturing women leaders, addressing women's rights, and creating a platform to engage in policy discussions at the highest level. Susanna, thank you for joining us today on behalf of the NUG. We're very happy that you could be with us. And I wanted to ask you, from your position in the NUG, you've been working, we all know, to document the threats that women and girls have been facing in terms of their security, their health, their livelihood, following the terrible failed coup. But what is the situation on the ground? Can you give us a sense of what is happening and what they're facing in terms of their livelihoods and other critical issues?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Ambassador, and also Georgetown University that organizing this important moment of Women, Peace and Security Week event, especially focused on the Myanmar issue. And I also would like to greet our ambassadors and our women leaders who are on the panel. So just today, we got the information that the fearful fighting happened in the current state, a city called Cochrane. And, you know, the revolution forces, they opened the prison because the coup, the military leader, they tried to arrest the political leaders in the prison, torture and kill. So the students and then the revolution soldier, they just fight and open the prison. And the junta used heavily airstrike and attack the city. So it's killed one woman, one man, and so many children, they got injury. This is not only one day happening, it's every day. Every day we hear the you know, and the hunter fighting, killing, hanging, and yeah, some are very, very much heartbroken, like they kill the school children, they fighting the school. So this is a real situation of our country since last year, 2021, February, when the military tried to control the power in our country. So we just heard the video of our sister Esther. They are very brave. The young generation, they took up they took their hands in hands and on the road, and so the whole Myanmar, this time they are very sure that this will be the last generation that we fight for the freedom from the military, because this is it's become the culture of Myanmar politics after the independence. Many coups happen, and then the first one who is against the students, a young generation, women, but finally they were cracked down by the military. But this time, the people are very strong and very united and very sure that this time will be the last time. So since a military coup, it's already 1 year and 8 months, the people are not give up. No, they are not drawing back. Every day, strike on the road, and then the people defense force, they took up their territory and prevents the people. They defend the people from killing and torturing from the military. But the result is not very much. You know, we are. Our heart are broken every day that you know, our relatives and friends and young people, they are giving their lives every day. And we just heard that one of our activist mother died in the prison because of the bomb blasting. And yeah, our sister Wairimu, she lost her youngest uncle last week. So it's very much, you know, the people suffering a lot. And so far, among the arrested people, 12,700, 2,500 are women. It's like 20% of the detainees are women. And the military torture and kill the people up to date is 2,335 people. Among them, 325 are women. It's mean 12% are women. So the women are struggling with men together on front line. with a non-violence movement. And also they are taking care of their families, protecting their children, but they are giving their lives on the street, on the front line. And we heard so many stories that they were, the women of Myanmar were raped and tortured daily. So far, our ministry received the report. 124 women were sexually violence, raped by the military. So this is only the reported and recorded case. It is like the iceberg phenomena. There will be hundreds and thousands of women who are suffering, and many cases are not reporting. And some of them are, gun raped by the military. The military person, they use the rape as a weapons of war to oppress the women, to oppress the ethnic, and this is what happened in our country. The ministry, our ministry is trying to, support and provide with the medicines and shelter for the survivors. So this is what we got, the report from the ground. So it will be more than that. And not only in the front line, yes,
Susanna,
in the city.
I wanted to, not to interrupt, but I wanted to ask you, given the horrible picture you just painted of the reality on the ground, what can the international community be doing to address some of these concerns, this terrible suffering, and what do you think is most urgently needed right now?
Yeah. So thank you, Ambassador. I have 3 recommendations because the needs are dire in the ground every day. We have the reports and records and like pregnant women running for their lives and they don't have enough medicine. So the first is international donors should provide the, funding, technical support, and create indicators to fully implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda for women of Myanmar. And they should include the assistance for the strengthening the rule of law and infrastructure, because rule of law is immediate need for our country, and target support for the promote women's economic livelihoods. Some of the liberation area, the women would like to restart their lives, so we need this kind of support. The second recommendation is to provide funding for the emergency support for the women in conflict. Focus on sexual violence survivors, pregnant women, and young girls. Last year, we can support 50,000 pregnant women with the international agency support. But this year, the funding is reduced, so we could not reach that kind of target again. And the third recommendation is to be the center of voice of Myanmar people, because we suffer a lot, suffer more than 70 years. And now with the last year coup, the people, 53 millions of people suffering. And please also help civil society. They also targeted by the military junta. They are running and they are hiding in the border area, and with all the policy engagement. And we also would like to ask our ASEAN community, as you are the main actor, to bring peace and stability for our country. And we really hope next year chairmanship of Indonesia to coming as a role of ASEAN chair. We are very much exciting and hoping to have the good relationship with the international community and ASEAN friends, and to recognize legitimate government of people of Myanmar, NUG, and working together to take the further step for the peace and stability of our country. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Susanna, and thank you for those very good recommendations that hopefully many of the actors in the international community and all of us who can will heed them. We're going to turn now to your sister on the panel, to Thinzar Shinlei. She is a democracy activist from Yangon and the founder of Sisters to Sisters Solidarity Movement. In response to the attempted coup in 2021, she co-created the movement to raise awareness and demand accountability for the military's systematic sexual abuse and repression of women activists. She's also part of the global network of peace builders, young women leaders for Peace in Myanmar network, where she advocates for women, peace and security, and youth peace and security agendas, along with the human rights of ethnic minorities in Burma. Shinlei, thank you so much for being with us. I want to ask you, how have the women that you've been working with that are mobilizing in response to the current crisis, how have they been doing that? What are the key concerns of the women leading the pro-democracy movement? We know how active they've been at great price. And also, it would be interesting to hear from you about the role of online platforms in digital mobilization in their efforts. So give us a sense of the women in the movement and what their key concerns are and how digital is being utilized.
Thank you, Ambassador. So as I speak in this panel, I think of all the fallen heroes and sisters who were brutally martyred for their activism. Today marks 636 days after the coup attempt in Myanmar. As you see, as the military coup plan was not successful, the oppression gets intense. As oppression and injustice arise, the resistance only gets stronger. We call it a spring revolution. Since the independence in Burma, student farmers and minority ethnic groups have stood up against injustices and inequality in politics and society. So in 2022, the revolutions rages on. So today it is the same revolution, the same spirit, the same demands, but conditions on the ground have changed. I'd like to share some facts about this evolution so that we may reflect on how to achieve long-lasting and meaningful peace and security for women of all ages, all the women at the root of Myanmar future's generations. First, the uprising demands is federal democracy. We're not asking for restoring the status quo that was hopelessly flawed 2008 constitution and ethnocentric power share with a corrupt military. We are risking our life to establish a new federal democratic nation. Any political actions initiated by the military are in bad faith. This includes the upcoming elections organized by the military. These are shams elections. We do not recognize or participate in the military roadmaps. Second, the revolution is intergenerational, cross-sectoral, online, and on the ground. Misogynists and fascists have assumed that women are weak. Women's group, such as Sister to Sister and other women's group in this panel, have fought back by condemning and documenting sexual violence and gender-based violence online and offline. The time is right for passionate criticism that will uproot discriminatory practices and norms that have poisoned our society for generations. We have raised our saroons as our flag, and we have Myanmar's particular forms of patriarchy in our sights. Only when misogynist and patriarchy ideologies are seduced can Myanmar women live in peace and security? Third, Myanmar Spring Revolution's main ideology is civil disobedience. Protests are daily occurrence in many parts of the country. In urban center, young people risk their life to raise their voices against what they know to be wrong. Today, I received a letter from the prison. One of the strike leaders, a young trans woman, she sent me a note that and said, "I'm doing well in the prison. Please do take care of my big sister. When I'm released, we will fight for women's rights together." So she has leukemia and she was adopted recently. She was tortured, but I'm glad that she communicates with me and think about the fight for all women in the country. We must recognize and celebrate the way that the Myanmar people, including women and non-normative people, and we all are waking up every day to refuse the military rule in Myanmar. So the journey ahead is a hardship, but it has already been 20 months since the coup attempt. We are moving one step at a time, methodologically and consistently. So soon we will establish a federal democratic nation where all our women feel safe and secure. Each of you can contribute to this as you stand in solidarity with the people of Myanmar in our quest for democracy and human rights. What you can do, first, set up an independent mechanism to handle sexual violence allegations. Develop a comprehensive protection plan in accordance with WPS mandate to protect WHRDs, women peace builder, and CRSV survivors. This includes providing safe havens. Second, create events and platforms such as like this for Myanmar women to promote global solidarity among women's protesters and human rights defenders around the world. And provide concrete measures to address the situation for the 83 political activists on death row and accountability for the 4 political activists that were recently executed. And another important thing is holding digital platforms such as Telegram, Facebook, Viber, YouTube, and TikTok accountable to end online gender-based violence. They must remove hate speech against women human rights defenders, politicians, the military, also their businesses. And another one is support local women's-led civil society, voluntary-based group, and localized organizations, especially those in the area that lack resources. The last but not the least, implement effective targeted sanctions, such as sanctioning MOGE, Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, so that as the gas flow stops, the flow of Myanmar people's blood stops. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shinlei. Your passion comes through and your commitment to continue this work against the greatest odds. And we are very grateful for your recommendations as well, because they have added to the list we are already hearing from the others and some important additions. So now we'll move to Anan Momo, who is the Joint Secretary of the Women's League of Burma, an umbrella organization made up of 13 women's organizations across different political and ethnic backgrounds in Burma. As a political empowerment program coordinator, she was responsible for managing the innovative women empowerment trainings. She was also a focal point of the Women League of Burma's Violence Against Women program, where she organized women's exchanges on dealing with domestic violence, workshops, and support for women survivors. Momo, we're really happy to have you with us as well. I know you're coming to us from the border area, and life is not easy for any. There have been widespread reports of sexual and gender-based violence, something obviously you and the Women's League of Burma have been working on, and this happens alongside the ongoing devastating humanitarian crisis. So tell us how the WLB is responding to this urgent situation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. So I'm Nang Momo and representing the Women League of Burma. And today I'm here to call the global attention in terms of the humanitarian crisis and also the sexual violence in conflict and conflict-related sexual violence in Burma. So like another colleagues already discussed in the previous talk, in the previous conversation, the military, they have caused the devastating humanitarian crisis through the forecast strategy of the cutting of telecommunication, food, money, and intelligence across the country, but especially mainly in Karenni and Chenstech, and also in Sakang and Magwe regions. This brutal escalating campaign, including air and drone strikes, military offensive, and burning the village, which have also destroyed at least 30,000 homes so far. As a result, over 1.3 million. At least 1.3 million people have been displaced. Currently, we are facing with the several humanitarian crises, such as the insufficient aid and also food insecurities and not enough shelter, those kind of things. But especially women face particular health challenges. The IDP women, they are particularly facing with the health challenges, including a lack of the sexual and reproductive health service, which have led to an increase in the premature birth, underweight birth, and increase also the infants' mortalities. So the military, they are the one who caused the crisis, and also currently the humanitarian aid from the international donors, international community. Some of the humanitarian aids goes through to the military, the military hunters. So they are the one who caused the crisis, and also they are the one who weaponized the humanitarian aid from the international communities. So the military is we should not trust with aid deliveries to area that it is currently attacking. And also the civilians, they will not accept the humanitarian aid that distribute through any military hunters or the military affiliated channel, as they are afraid of black sheep, and there is a risk that the military will weaponize the aids. And secondly, I would like to draw the attentions on the women, especially the conflict-related sexual violence or sexual violence in conflicts. So the Burmese army, they have a long history of using sexual and gender-based violence as a weapon of war and as a means of intimidation and control the population in ethnic areas in the countries. So the conflict-related sexual violence or gender-based violence that committed by the military is we already suffer for more than 70 years. But currently, the junta have used the same tactics against women and girls all over the countries to silence the women's voices. Since the coup, the gender-based violence with absolute impunity by the junta security force against women and girls have increased dramatically. I would like to call the global's attention and to take the high decisive action. So it is a high time to take the really decisive actions against this serious violation of international law, and also to preserve international peace and security and fulfill the mandates contained in the resolution 1325, the women, peace and security, and also the resolution 1674, which is the protection of the civilians. So first, my recommendation is the international community and humanitarian organizations, they shall support the cross-border assistance to the internally displaced people, human rights defenders, human rights activists, and those who invoke an anti-hunters movement. And also international donor and partner countries should work closely with the women and also civil society organization to distribute the humanitarian aid. And also the role of the United Nations and ASEAN country is also really significant in terms of the humanitarian aid. So the United States and also ASEAN countries, as ASEAN and also ASEAN individual country, choose mediate with the neighboring country, including Thailand, to open the humanitarian corridors to provide cross-border humanitarian assistance. Another one is the enact targeted sanctions against the Burmese military and its process to effectively cut off their financial flow, and institutes a comprehensive global arms embargo with robust monitoring and enforcement mechanisms to end the direct and indirect supply, sale, or transfer of all weapons and other equipment that may be used for trainings, intelligence, and military assistance. And also to refer the situation on human rights in Burma to the International Criminal Court for their crimes against humanity, which have been perpetrated against innocent civilians, including the peaceful protests and ethnic groups. And the last recommendation is the coming November, there is the really important events is going to happen. ASEAN Summit is going to organize in Cambodia on November, and also the Bali G20 Summit is also going to happen on November 15 to 16. So in this big event, the situation of Burma, especially the continuous of the crimes against humanity, war crimes, should be paid attention by the international community, and also in the summit, in the events that all stakeholder must take the very decisive actions for Burma to be able to respond in terms of the humanitarian crisis and also the women, peace and security. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mumu, and for those very concrete recommendations for going forward. I think the reference certainly to the multilateral world, to ASEAN, we will not only have heard you now, but we will compile them along with the other panelists so that we can get them out more broadly for the kind of action that they deserve. So thank you for your comments. I know you put a lot of effort into it, and we're very grateful to you. And now we'll turn to Wairimu, who was a leading voice for human rights and peace in Burma, and just an extremely dedicated advocate on behalf of Rohingya women and girls. She currently serves as the founder and executive director of the Women's Peace Network, which conducts trainings around civic engagement in Rakhine State, and is the founder of the Yangon Youth Leadership Center, where she was bolstering peace-building efforts and empowering Burma's women and youth through legal counsel and rights education. And she also worked for Justice for Women in Yangon, an organization supporting survivors of gender-based violence. Wei, it's really good to have you with us. And I want to ask you that, given the genocide committed against the Rohingya minority and the failure of the international community to hold the military and the security forces accountable, and we've heard a good bit already about the impunity, what kind of international action would make a difference? Because clearly there's more work that needs to be done, and critical work at that.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Vivia, member states and Georgetown staffs and all our friends for organizing this important event today. I'm very honored to take part in these discussions. From the atrocities committed against the ethnic minorities, including Rohingya genocide, including genocide against Rohingya, for decades and against Burma's entire populations for over a year, it's clear that the international community has failed to act for the good of the country. I believe that this failure comes from the decades of the international community's attempts to improve the status quo in Burma, which continue to embolden the perpetrators of these atrocities to commit more of them. As we speak today, our sisters has already described, our sisters and mothers continue to face the most brutal forms of atrocities under the military, including the blatant killings, arbitrary arrests, torture, and sexual violence and rape. Displaced women inside Myanmar or in the neighboring countries face extreme vulnerability for sexual exploitations and human trafficking, in addition to their existing challenges and threat that they face as IDP camps or refugee camps. What we need is, as you said, Ambassador, a radical transformations in the international community is approach to Burma. Countries and governments must understand that the situations in Burma is no longer a political crisis, but rather a human rights catastrophe overlaying a humanitarian crisis. They must also be reminded of their responsibility to protect communities from atrocities and prevent them from happening again. The UN Security Council has a mandate to protect women, in accordance with its own WPS Women's Peace and Security agenda. It is from this understanding and responsibility that the international community should work together to effectively pursue further actions for justice and accountability across the country, according to the following steps. Some of those has been highlighted by previous speakers, our sisters and leaders here today. First, acknowledge the reality of the victims and survivors, officially recognize ongoing atrocities, including the Rohingya genocide, and that have been committed across Burma for decades. The international community must be in agreement with the basic fact of the matter as told by the affected communities in order to transform it for their good. A second, meaningfully consult with and effectively support the affected communities and their civil society. These steps is necessary for the international community to know what to do to make a positive and sustainable impact in Burma. UN organizations in particular should consult with the Burmese society, civil society groups to deliver their humanitarian aids to the countries, including the National Unity Government, consulting with the National Unity Government. The international community and the UN Security Council must no longer use the ASEAN 5-point consensus, which entails engagement with the military and has repeatedly been violated by its forces as an excuse for its inaction. Lastly, a comprehensive measure in accordance with these consultations and put them into immediate effect. These measures must include a robust support for ongoing and potential justice processes, such as intervening in the ICJ Rohingya genocide case, providing financial and material support to the IIN, the international investigative mechanisms on Myanmar, exploring universal jurisdictions and referring Burma's situations to the International Criminal Court, and creating a special or regional accountability mechanisms for the country. And all, I think one of the most important aspects of this justice processes is to really like put a lot of effort to have a really victim-centered approach in all these ongoing and potential justice processes that we need for the country. I think I think all of the ongoing processes and future processes will be doing with good deed, and we can only make the most impact or effective for the justice for the victims and survivors if we put effort to have a victim voice at the center. So that's the key here to make it more difference. These measures should also include economic sanctions and financial penalties against the Burmese militaries and its related businesses, including MOGE, Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, as other speakers were highlighted. Countries, especially China and Russia, must stop selling weapons to the military and impose arms embargo on Burma. All the above measures actually can be done unilaterally or multilaterally, or by introducing a resolution at the UN Security Council. Although we might know that might get vetoed, we are hoping that if it is vetoed at the Security Council, the discussions can then go to the UN General Assembly and we can have some sort of resolutions for Burma. I believe that these actions to bring justice and accountability to Burma as a way to end ongoing catastrophe are essential for the country's people to finally begin establishing a democratic systems that respect the rights and dignity of all, especially the Rohingya. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wei Wei. And I think your good, concrete recommendations along those with the others on the panel. All of you have experienced what's going on today with the crisis in Burma firsthand. You're hearing from people on the ground. You are close in terms of knowing what is happening in a way that many of the rest of us can't possibly know, even just reading about the crisis. So we will put all of these recommendations together and get them to an even wider audience than the many hundreds, over 600 that are joining us today on Zoom and many more on Facebook. So thank you to our panelists for all of those recommendations. I want to turn now to our interventions from member state representatives and go first to His Excellency Jakub Kochanek, who is the permanent representative of the Czech Republic to the United Nations. The ambassador served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, simultaneously holding the position of Deputy Minister of the Interior, and his work experience spans several positions at think tanks, the cabinet of the EU Enlargement Commissioner, and NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I might add, just because we are the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security, that the ambassador has received his MA from Georgetown School of Foreign Service. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador, not just for what you will tell us today, but also for the ongoing work that the Czech Republic has been doing on the Burma issue.
Thank you, Ambassador. And first of all, let me join others in thanking the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security for making this event possible. Also, many thanks to all the speakers today. And I'm very happy that the Czech mission to the United Nations is proudly co-sponsoring this event. But now, as to the matter at hand, since the military coup in Myanmar, the human rights abuses and violations have amounted to systematic crimes against humanity and are especially devastating for women and girls. Let me bring to your attention just 3 aspects that I consider especially important. And also, I would like to provide some suggestions as to what we as the international community can do to address the dire situation of women and girls in Myanmar. The first point I'd like to make is that women have bravely led and actively participated in the civil resistance movement in opposition to the coup. At least 2,545 women have been in custody. There are 9 women human rights defenders on death row, all convicted in closed trials in a military court that fell far short of any international standards. There are reports of widespread violence in detention facilities, including sexual and gender-based violence, abuse, torture, and sexual harassment. Furthermore, over 1/3 of women in the country also report feeling unsafe in their homes at night. However, deep-rooted gender stereotypes in Myanmar affect women's and girls' ability to talk about abuse and leave violent relationships. Therefore, I suggest we must support those fighting for democracy and justice and implement a protection plan to provide a safe haven for conflict-related sexual violence survivors, women human rights defenders, and women peace builders. We also need to ensure that the International Committee of the Red Cross regains access to prisons. The international community should further assist survivors of domestic violence and encourage their participation in seeking solutions. My second point I want to make is that according to the most recent estimates of the UNHCR, there are some 1,389,000 displaced people within Myanmar, of which close to 80% are women and children. When the delivery of basic services collapsed in the country, dedicated and brave volunteers from women's groups, civil society organizations, communities and ethnic health organizations stepped in to help. So what we can do is that we should provide targeted long-term resources for women's groups. We should also increase support to displaced communities across Myanmar wherever safe and feasible, and help to improve their opportunities to engage in dignified work. Last but not least, I want to draw your attention to the fact that women and girls in Myanmar face disproportionate threats from security forces. They have been victims of escalating sexual and gender-based crimes, including security force perpetrated rapes, gang rapes, sexual assaults, and sexual harassment. Survivors of security force abuses are unable to access any justice. That is why the international community must facilitate thorough, impartial, and independent investigations into all allegations of violations of international humanitarian law, crimes of sexual and gender-based violence, and allegations of human rights violations, and ensure that the perpetrators are brought to justice through transparent and credible processes. I thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. And your words are both powerful and very concrete in terms of what needs to be done. And I know you and our other member states who are with us and those beyond this program today will be pursuing a more aggressive agenda in this regard. We want to turn now to His Excellency Christopher Liu, who is the Ambassador for Management at the U.S. mission to the United Nations. Ambassador Liu was formerly the Deputy Secretary of Labor for the United States, and we're really pleased that he could be with us this morning as well. Welcome, Ambassador Liu. We can't hear you. No luck. Well, since we can't hear you, Mr. Ambassador, I think what we should do, if it's agreeable with you, is to take the words that you were going to convey, and we will post them on the website and get them out that way, unless you can find some miraculous way to link up with us. But no, it's not working, is it?
No.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, perfect. My sincere apologies. You know that these technical difficulties are always a challenge. So I want to thank you for your patience and thank Georgetown for hosting this very timely event to address human rights and accountability in Burma. And I especially want to thank the brave activists for their moving testimony this morning, and more importantly, for the work that you're doing on the ground. You know, in August, we commemorated the 5th anniversary of the horrific 2017 campaign against Rohingya, during which members of the Burmese military committed genocide and crimes against humanity. Many of these same military forces participated in the coup, and they continued to repress, physically abuse, and kill the people of Burma in a blatant attempt to extinguish Burma's democratic future. The regime's executions of pro-democracy and opposition leaders in July show their complete disregard for the lives of the Burmese people. This violence has exacerbated the worsening humanitarian situation, particularly for ethnic and religious minority communities, including Rohingya, which continue to remain among the most vulnerable and marginalized people in the country. We in the United States are deeply troubled by the ongoing reports of human rights abuses, including the increase in gender-based violence. Women and girls in areas where fighting is ongoing are particularly vulnerable to sexual violence, arbitrary detention, and forced labor. The United States continues to call for an immediate end to violence and accountability and justice for all victims. The U.S. has provided more than $1.7 billion to assist those affected by the crisis in Burma, Bangladesh, and elsewhere in the region, remaining the largest single donor of life-saving humanitarian assistance. We provide support to the UN's independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar, which has a mandate to collect, consolidate, preserve, and analyze evidence of the most serious international crimes and violations of international law committed in Burma, as well as to prepare files to facilitate fair and independent criminal proceedings in national, regional, and international courts of tribunals that may have future jurisdiction over these crimes. This support includes providing IIMM with $2 million of funding to strengthen its capacity to conduct open source investigation and enhance its capacity to protect victims and witnesses. And we are working with the Rohingya community to help document the atrocities and abuses committed against them. And we stand ready to support a holistic transitional justice process to address the long history of atrocities and abuses against Rohingya, a process that respects the demands of victims for truth, reparation, justice, and non-recurrence once that becomes viable. Secretary Blinken has made clear that the United States, quotes, supports measures by the UN Security Council to promote justice and accountability for the military's action in line with its mandate to promote international peace and security, and in this vein would support a UN Security Council referral of the situation in Burma to the International Criminal Court. Preventing the recurrence of atrocities, addressing the needs of victims, and ensuring that those responsible for atrocities are held accountable are essential to addressing the military's continued impunity for human rights abuses and ensure a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic Burma that respects the human rights of all. I want to thank you, Ambassador, again for convening this session, and thank all the participants, including my colleagues in the UK and Czech mission. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Liu, and to you and your colleagues. May you go with haste to do more on what needs to be done. We've had some recommendations, not just from those on the front lines who have been with us today, but also from all of you in the diplomatic corps who have provided powerful interventions. So while the program has come to an end, the work in many ways must begin with much more haste and seriousness, because there's far more to do than has been achieved so far. This is a crisis that we can no longer ignore or put on the back burner with so much else that is happening in our world. I especially want to thank Susanna, Mumu, Shinlei, Weiwei, for your steadfast work, for your sacrifices, and for your dedication to the cause that each of you has made one that drives you to do and bring better times than those that we are witnessing today in Burma. And I want to thank all the member state representatives who joined in this with us today and have co-sponsored this program, and to all of those hundreds who have joined us to hear you and to understand what more we all need to do, because what we have heard from you is a call to action. And I hope that we can all be doing a much better job in ensuring that what you have called for today can be achieved much more quickly and seriously than has been to date. So let's all do what we can. We thank all of you, and we will go forward and be mindful of the work that must be done to address the horrific crisis that is taking place in Burma today. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.